Hey guys, welcome to the Wrestling Escape Pod. Welcome to episode something I can't even remember anymore.
They've been so good.
Do you know what? It doesn't even matter anymore. I'm pretty sure the title is going to tell you what episode this is. I'll tell you what episode this is. This is the worst wrestling results episode. That's what episode this is. Big shout out to Tommy Toy Travels. Who
What's up, guys?
Are you stockpiling like toilet roll or something? What are you doing?
Of course. There's a big stockpile of toilet paper in my den because right now there is an issue where we don't have toilet paper in America. So I stocked up because I knew, just like wrestling shows, you gotta throw the toilet paper at the heels that you dislike. So that's what I was doing.
In my mind, your whole house is just built out of toilet paper.
Yeah, I might have gone a little too hard.
Can I ask as well, is that a window that I can see behind you?
Yeah, that's a window.
Okay, cool. One day I want to find out what the view is from that window. We don't need to know now. It's going to become a massive thing.
All right. And no spoilers, but whoa.
Yeah, for those listening, there is a second window confirmed in the room. Yeah, not like me, that's currently trapped in just like a black void.
Yeah. Well, you're safe. You're safe underground because
safe. I'm very safe.
Do you have toilet paper though down there?
No, but then I've never used it, so I'm absolutely fine.
How do you never use it?
It's a joke.
Big on bidets?
It's a joke. This isn't Is this even an episode of a podcast?
Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to this episode of this podcast where we're talking about wrestling, and it's the Wrestling Escape. This is why I don't do the intros, because I stumble over my words. And today we're talking about disappointments, just like I am to my parents. So let's start off with one big. It is disappointments, right? That's what we're talking about. Disappointments in wrestling.
I would say most disappointing results, the worst results, the ones that really stick in the throat, the stabs in the heart.
All right.
Disappointments, however you want to word it.
Okay. My list are some disappointments, but I will kick off with one that I know really bothers me to this day. It is when Damien Sandow cashed in his Money in the Bank and was decimated by John Cena, and he never regained any sense of his character and never was able to come back as the strong Sandow that everyone said would happen post Cena burying. They were like, this is his moment. He went one-on-one with Cena, even though he lost. It was like he was gonna win, and that means that he's gonna be pushed to the moon, and he wasn't. He just became Mizdow, and then he was fired, and sure, he ended up on NWA, but for me, I was like, I shed tears, not real tears, but metaphorical. Metaphorically, I was shedding tears at the destruction of the Damien Sandow character, because once he lost, it was like, I lost faith.
That is deep. That is deep.
Yeah.
That might be why you've got that toilet roll. Perhaps you're still shedding tears. Damien Sandow's failed cash-in. I seem to remember he had a fantastic case. Didn't he have a briefcase that he kind of had fashioned when he was the holder of Money in the Bank? It's kind of weird to think of him as even having Money in the Bank. It's not until you just mentioned it, I'd completely forgotten that he had even got that briefcase. But I do remember that being a very, very disappointing moment. And as you said, he never really recovered from that. Never got back to those heights, did he?
No, like he was good as Damien Mizdow. Like that was a really great comedy act, and he put his all in it. But when he was Damien Sandow, it was something where every time he came out, I was like, "This is awesome! I'm loving this." And he was never able to shine. Hopefully on NWA, this will be his moment. This will be what he's remembered for. But for me, what he's remembered for is losing to John Cena. And some people could say that maybe John Cena is one of the biggest disappointment creators because certainly a lot of wrestlers came hot off NXT and the first person they faced was John Cena, like Sami Zayn, red hot. John Cena, and look at him now. He's not red hot. So is Cena the one that creates the disappointment? Zack Ryder, who I'm going to talk about later.
Okay.
Did they had something, right? Mm-hmm. Wasn't the kiss because of John Cena?
What, with Zack Ryder?
Yeah.
I mean, Zack Ryder's been very stop-start. He's coming in, obviously, as an edge head. Obviously things went from there. But he's had a very kind of up and down career. I think with Zack Ryder, though, at least he did manage to get that WrestleMania moment where he got the Intercontinental Championship. But even that was kind of crazy because he only held it for 24 hours, didn't he?
Yeah, he lost it the next day. But like Long Island Ice-Z. Yeah, I loved that show, and how he was able to naturally create himself as a superstar was so cool. And it was like Vince. It seemed like Vince was like, "Yo, I create the stars, not you." And someone turned their back on him. I don't remember who it was, but all I remember is just him in a wheelchair getting kicked off by Eve or something terrible. I can't even remember it. My mind's buried. Hopefully you can take this and lift it up better than I can right now.
Well, I mean, look, in regards to disappointing results, I straight away think about things like the Montreal Screwjob. I think about the end of the streak. I don't necessarily think about
little things.
Zack Ryder in a wheelchair, but it absolutely is each to their own.
Yeah, I don't care about the streak. I don't care about the screw job. This, to me, is personal.
I mean, look. We are talking about the streak. Let's talk about the streak. Okay, did I know you don't care about it, but did you feel that? First of all,
when Kurt Hawkins finally won a match,
yes,
when his losing streak was over, it wasn't disappointing. It was very rewarding as a Kurt Hawkins fan. You know, I had his figure within his Brodus Clay 2-pack, and then he was on Grimm's Toy Show, and it was like he kept losing, and I was like, is this going to be him fired? But no, he finally won. The streak was over.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Unless there was another streak you wanted to talk about.
Well, I mean, maybe. There was obviously the Undertakers WrestleMania streak. What are your thoughts on Lesnar being the one to end that? Can you recall seeing that match?
Oh, of course, it was shocking. I think that, in my opinion, it was the perfect time. It was the perfect person because he's a legitimate fighter, and Vince is always one who I feel like is it Smark or Mark, who's always like, yeah, Vince thinks this, thinks that, but it seems like Vince likes to legitimize wrestling and really puts MMA people like Ronda Rousey and Brock Lesnar to the front, and to have him be the one to end it, someone who's friends with Undertaker and who was able to really relaunch his WWE career through that win. I think it was perfect time. And I'm kind of the mind that Undertaker kind of should have retired after that, but I still want to see Sting versus Undertaker. But I loved it. I wasn't disappointed. I was shocked.
Yeah, I'm actually going to agree, and this might disappoint a lot of people listening because this is definitely a result that splits WWE fans. So for those of you that don't know, The Undertaker had been undefeated at WrestleMania for, I think, 21 WrestleManias that he'd competed at. So 21 times he'd fought at WrestleMania, 21 times he had been victorious. It's known as the streak. It is bigger than the championship towards the end. Like, I would say people look forward to Undertaker's match more so than the WWE Championship match that year. It really was the thing. Who is going to face Undertaker this year? And we got to WrestleMania 30. Brock Lesnar was the one to face The Undertaker. He actually went in with next to no one believing that he was going to win. And looking back on it now, it's kind of crazy to think that Brock Lesnar, former UFC heavyweight champion, went into that match as not just an underdog, but a complete rank outsider. No one gave him a chance. Yeah, when he does beat Undertaker, it shocks the world. It absolutely shocks the world. I would put that down as maybe the most shocking moment in wrestling. Like, I really do feel that the end of the streak and that moment and seeing it end, because we didn't even know if we would see it end. And yeah, I've got to be honest, I actually would agree with it. Maybe they could have saved it a year and had someone like Bray Wyatt end the streak. Bray, I mean, a lot of what people say is that there was people coming through that could have really benefited from ending the streak. You know, in a way, Brock Lesnar was obviously already a made man. But the truth was, he went into that match as a heavy underdog. So he certainly was never an underdog again after it. So it did change perception. Obviously, you know, they could gloat about that for, well, they continue to gloat about that even till today. Yeah, it was a shocking moment. I'm someone that feels the streak should end. You build these things up, and surely there has to be a payoff. You have to let someone get a benefit of ending that streak, because otherwise the Undertaker just, you know, rides off with it into retirement. And wrestling has always been about giving back. Like, traditionally, you would lose your last match, so there's no real point having a streak unless it's going to be broken. And so I would actually agree that Brock's not a bad choice in retrospect. You know, he's legit. It's not as if they gave it to someone that obviously never lived up to that. That's a big thing to carry, to be the one to end the streak as well. Because had it have been Bray, I mean, look what happened with the original Bray character. It never got the push that we all wanted it to have. And so really, it could have amounted to nothing. Bray obviously has come back with a great character now, the Fiend and the Funhouse, and everything's great now. But obviously, this isn't the Bray that we had at WrestleMania 30. So would he have been the right person to have ended the streak? Look at Finn Balor. Finn Balor's down in NXT now. Finn Balor, for whatever reason, didn't really kick on or wasn't allowed to kick on. Would he have been the right person to have ended the streak? So certainly a very debatable topic. But yeah, I would agree with you. All things considered, I don't really class this as a bad result. What's your next one that you've got then?
All right, this one is one of those things where it's like, I get it, but it could have been handled better. It's Enzo Amore's firing. Like, I understand as a company, when allegations like that come out, there does need to be due process. But once it came that he was innocent, I would have liked to see him back in the company, because he was, love him or hate him, he was invigorating the 205 brand in a way that it still to this day hasn't been invigorated. He wasn't the best wrestler, but he was a great character, and characters are what WWE is most known for. And I really feel like he could have definitely had a better run. Certainly people like Gulak were able to be themselves rather than just being his side character, but it's still one of those things where I look back and it's like, they had money with him. Maybe the backstage politics really built into it, but I would have liked to see him have a longer run with the company. And Ring of Honor, brought him in for like 2 seconds on their big New Japan show and never brought him back. And that's another really like, what are you thinking type of thing? Because it's like, why would hardcore indie fans at a New Japan show be like, yo, Enzo Amore's in the house? Yeah. Like, yeah. So it's one of those things where it's like, I understand where WWE is coming from, but I still think that they could have worked something out with him.
I do think that's a really interesting one, because what you're touching on there is, it's actually not one that I even considered. But what you're touching on there is real life. You're talking about a man that was accused of something, obviously lost his job. And then, as you said, it turned out that he was innocent, and he never got his job back. Now, yes, there could have been other aspects, as you said, and maybe they were trying to find a way of, helping him out of the door anyway. But yeah, interesting. A very interesting pick. I can see why you've gone for it. One that I would definitely like to throw into the mix, if we're talking about like the worst results. In a way, this is kind of a bit of a whole angle, and that is WCW, the finger poke of doom. So I've got to give a shout out to Brad Laura, who recommended this one. Kind of leads into the end of another streak as well, and that's Goldberg's streak. So shout out to Kevin Paveo, who recommended that also. So Goldberg had actually won 173 matches and was undefeated. He'd won championships, he'd beaten Hulk Hogan, and it was really about who was going to beat Goldberg. And Kevin Nash was actually booking the show at the time. He was booking WCW, and Kevin Nash decided that he was going to be the one that was going to beat Goldberg. There wasn't much logic or reason or rhyme, but literally just because he was booking the show. Now, he was a big star. They could have made this into a nice story, a good match, but there was a cattle prod that was involved, and it all got very hokey, and it really left people feeling underwhelmed. Like, it kind of felt like everything had built up to that. It was like a screwy finish. I think people wanted it to see it, given the respect that it really deserved, and a nice clean finish and an epic war, and finally someone slays Goldberg kind of a thing. The fact that this had heel tactics and was overbooked, and it was Kevin Nash that was putting himself over it. It didn't sit like right with people. So yeah, it kind of, that very much backfired. And this led actually to the finger poke of doom, because it was a week later from that it was meant to be the rematch. It was meant to be Nash versus Goldberg, but Goldberg gets arrested during the show, and he can't make it back in time for the main event. He can't make it back in time for the rematch. And what's amazing is it turned out that the police station they'd even told us this on the show, it was over the road. So how did he not get back in time? It was over the road. Like, he had to cross one road, and he could not make it back in time. So there was big plot holes throughout this whole thing. And the end result was a returning Hulk Hogan would replace Goldberg. So we had Kevin Nash versus Hulk Hogan instead. And, that's exciting. These two had been rivals. They had kind of broken apart at this point. One was the leader of NWO Wolfpack. The other was the leader of NWO Hollywood. They hated each other. They'd been feuding with each other. So what was going to happen now? Hogan had been away for about a month at this point. So there was still a lot of intrigue. Okay, Goldberg's streak was over and it was stupid, but we can forget that. Okay, Goldberg had been arrested and it was stupid, but we can forget that. So what are we going to get now? Nash versus Hogan. How does this play out? Well, how it plays out is the finger poke of doom. Hulk Hogan pokes Kevin Nash. Kevin Nash lies down. Hogan pins him. 1, 2, 3. And it turns out that NWO was actually coming together again. They were going to reform as one again. And so this was a way of Kevin Nash gifting the championship to Hulk Hogan. But it was just a catalogue of errors. You could say that the result of the end of Goldberg's streak was, the wrong way to go about it. Certainly, the finger poke of doom, that's what people look at as really one of the nails, one of the major nails in the coffin of WCW. So, yeah, this whole period, this whole saga, just a complete booking nightmare.
I think
Stunned
that's
silence.
Yeah, we could do a whole month of episodes about dumb things WCW did because they're no more, and then another year of dumb stuff TNA does Impact. Although I don't think they're doing as many things as they did, but yeah, WCW, just so many of those things. It's just like, I get why WWE won.
Yeah,
That's all I could say.
Very, very much so. Because it does bring me to another WCW thing, and that would be David Arquette winning the World Heavyweight Championship. He wins this in the year 2000. WCW by this point is very much on its knees anyway, but this is arguably the final nail in the coffin of WCW. So Diamond Dallas Page is the champion at this point, and he is meant to lose the title to Jeff Jarrett. Now, rumors are he refuses to do that. So what they do instead is they book a tag match where whoever gets the pin wins the belt. So in this tag match is Diamond Dallas Page. His partner, amazingly, is David Arquette. Now, David Arquette, an actor, he's in this match because he's promoting the film. I think it's Ready to Rumble.
Ready to Rumble.
Yeah. I've not seen it. I've not seen that film.
Really, I don't think it's readily available. It's one of those where you go on eBay to buy it and you're going to be spending a lot of money. I do own the soundtrack on CD, but not the film itself.
Well, he is the partner of Diamond Dallas Page. In the opposite corner, Jeff Jarrett, and his partner, Eric Bischoff. So whoever gets the pin is going to win the title. I mean, straight away, that's bizarre that the title's being defended in a tag match like this. Very, very unorthodox. But the end result is that David Arquette gets the pin. David Arquette wins the World Heavyweight Wrestling Championship. And what's even crazier is Diamond Dallas Page celebrates with David Arquette. Diamond Dallas Page seems pleased that he's just lost the championship to David Arquette. Now, I think it's probably because he's pleased that he's not lost it to Jeff Jarrett, but it's very strange. It's very, very strange. And obviously to see David Arquette on top of the wrestling world being, I mean, this is the same belt that like Ric Flair and Sting and Hogan have carried, and now it's around the waist of David Arquette. That was a bad call. It was a bad moment in the history of wrestling. And I do actually feel very, very sorry for David Arquette because it wasn't really his fault. It's not something that he wanted or requested or demanded. It was something WCW wanted to do. Amazingly, something they wanted to do because they had a bit of a booking problem. They thought it would be great promotion for the film. He is someone that's actually a big wrestling fan. He's very respectful of wrestling, and he's had to kind of carry around this albatross, if you will. So I do genuinely feel very sorry for him. It's not his fault. I mean, if someone said, we're going to make you the world champion, you'd probably go, okay. Do you know what I mean? Well, like, it's not going to be many people that are going to turn that down. So, I do very much feel sorry for him on that.
Daze, have you ever held a championship title?
I mean, a replica, yes.
You are talking to a past. Oh man, what is it? What is it called? Can I?
Like, you can't even remember what belt you had.
I can't even remember.
Of all the things, do you know what? Like, everything went quiet. It was like really dramatic. The moment was absolutely perfect. You are talking to.
Then I lost my camera.
Brilliant. Now your camera's gone. Yeah.
Hold on, it's back. I got it.
This has gone so well. No, what are you? Who am I talking to?
It was the. I remembered it because I laughed so much. I didn't even have to look it up. It was the DDT heavy man weight, like it's their version of the 24/7 title at Beyond Wrestling. Once upon a time, Joey Ryan brought it there, and there was one part where the crowd got the belt, and I was in the crowd, so therefore.
Wow.
Yeah, but we lost it because we
lost it.
We deserve it. So that's tapping out.
Oh, what? Did you lose the title?
The crowd
lost the title
because someone wanted to tap on the ring. We deserve it. Yeah. It was a real shame, but yeah, I am a title holder, just like David Arquette.
Wow.
And some could say that is one of the most disappointing results in wrestling is your boy Triple T getting a DDT title, and then another disappointing result is me laughing so hard I rip out my webcam during a podcast.
Have you got another disappointing result that you want to go through then?
I do. I have my final one, and it's for the indie fans because I know you have a lot of them that were super excited when I talked about Stardom. I think that was our first episode. So back when Samoa Joe was done with TNA, he was doing a few indie shows, just a quick tour of the indies before doing WWE. And he was doing this series, 3 matches called the Trilogy between him and Evolve's Chris Dickinson. The 3 of them took place at House of Glory, XWA, and Beyond Wrestling. So if you know wrestling, yes, you know if you have 3 matches, someone wins one, then the other person should win one, and then the victor.
Yeah.
So the way they did that was they just had Samoa Joe win all 3. And it was just like, what's the point of this? Because like after the second match, it's like, what's the point of the third match? He already lost twice, and then he lost again, so he didn't even redeem himself. And it was just...
That is glorious booking. In all fairness, that is.
Some people think that it's because WWE didn't want him to lose, but like, don't book him in 3 matches against the same person and have it be a trilogy of matches because that's just not smart.
Yeah.
And it frustrated me as someone that saw 2 out of the 3. It's just like I played myself.
There's quite a few more for us to just touch on before we get towards the end of the episode.
Of course, you have the legitimate ones.
One that I want to get back to, really back in the day, would be when Bruno Sammartino lost his WWF championship. He'd been champion for 7 years, and he went up against Ivan Koloff. This was in 1971. I believe, Madison Square Garden in front of like 22,000 people. He'd been champion 7 years. I mean, that's hard to fathom. That's hard to kind of get your head around, someone being champion for that length of time. But it happened. He'd been champion from, I think, 1964 through to 71. And it was, as I said, Madison Square Garden. And he loses the title to Ivan Koloff. They say that there was just stunned silence. They couldn't give the belt to Ivan Koloff because there would have been a riot. Like Bruno, we've spoken about Bruno before, and there's a good reason for it, because he was known as the living legend, and he really transcended wrestling. Like, he was a full-blown hero to people. So to see him lose the title, like, there was people in the audience in floods of tears. So I suppose you could go back to that and say, you know, was that a bad result? Was that one of the most disappointing results, or the worst results? I think certainly one of the most disappointing. But I think Bruno had a lot of health issues. I don't think he could really continue doing that schedule. You know, I mean, 7 years as champion is a grueling schedule. So he just really couldn't continue with that. So he was kind of fine with dropping the title. Ivan Koloff was a bit of a transitional champion. I believe he ends up dropping it not too long after to like Pedro Morales, who would hold it for quite a while. But that's certainly one of the earlier examples of shocking kind of results, if you will. We very vaguely touched on the Montreal Screwjob, Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, 97. Do you want to kind of go through your perspective on that?
Yeah, I'd hate to, go do a deep dive into this, because I feel like we could do a whole episode on this one and talk about all the conspiracy theories. But basically, a TLDR version of it is Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart have a match, and Bret Hart is going to WCW, but it's in his hometown, and they fast count.
Yeah.
And he loses to Shawn Michaels, and he's like, "What the heck?" And people are like, "Oh, did he say what the heck on purpose?" And to this day, people don't know, but we kind of do know, but we don't know.
He was, I think it was sharpshooter, actually, that Shawn had on Bret. Referee calls for the bell, even though Bret hadn't submitted.
Yeah.
The reason for it was because Bret was going to WCW. He was champion at the time. He refused to lose the championship in Montreal, which, as you said, Canada, where he's from. So he refused to drop the title there. But, he literally had, I think the next night on Raw would be the final place that he could do it. That wasn't the plan. They wanted to get the title onto Shawn, and so they screwed him. And so really you can look at that as part of the start of the Attitude Era, if you will. The Attitude Era, in a way, kind of goes a little bit before that, but very much were off to the races at that point. And one of the most shocking, one of the most controversial moments in the history of wrestling. So crazy. I've got loads that I can touch on. I think for me the worst moment of 2018 would be Shane McMahon winning the World Cup. Shout out to Jules the King for that one. The World Cup is not something they've done before or since, and I was actually very excited about it, because obviously being in the UK, we love the World Cup, the Football World Cup. So for WWE to do a tournament World Cup, I thought was a great idea. Turns out that it only had American participants, though. So it had American participants exclusively. We got down to the final, and then in the final, The Miz gets injured. I can't remember if the match had started or not. And his replacement is Shane McMahon, a person that hadn't been in the tournament at all, played no part in any of the qualifying rounds, and just out of the blue inserted himself into the final and wins the World Cup. So it would go on to like kind of form part of a heel turn. But I think for me, the fact that this was a great idea and something that I believe they should do anyway, and for them to treat it that way and for it to result in what it resulted in, that for me would be probably one of the most disappointing, if not the most disappointing moments of 2018. 2019, I think we've got to look at The Fiend. We've got to look at Seth Rollins. We've got to look at... Do you remember that match? Hell in a Cell.
I buried that in my mind. How is that even possible? How? Like how?
How? I mean, you can have ref stoppage, but the problem was Hell in a Cell, you can't have disqualifications, and the kind of original message that came out was that Seth Rollins had been disqualified, but you can't be disqualified inside Hell in a Cell. But they did actually come out and say that it was a ref stoppage ultimately, but they still didn't really confirm who had won the match. Like the whole finish is just a complete mess. The communication of it, I feel like what they were trying to do was they were trying to drive Seth to a very dark place. The Fiend was trying to push Seth to his limits, go further than he's gone before, use weapons. And, you know, Fiend got to a point where he wasn't moving, and Seth still wanted to hit him with weapons and things along those lines. So Seth was very much being driven to madness, driven to a dark place. And I feel like that's what The Fiend was trying to do. And so I feel like there was a story there. But this confusion about disqualifications and ref stoppages and all of this kind of stuff, it's very much seen as one of the most hated finishes in recent times.
It certainly brought me to a dark place. I don't know if Seth Rollins ever got there, but for me personally, that match, and that was like one of the few ones that they used the red light, right? So
yeah, people hate the red light as well. Yeah. People hate that red light.
That match was a disappointment.
It was. I've got a few more. I mean, I honestly, I could keep on going, and I feel like this is probably a topic that we're going to have to
if we could do like 15 million of this, and it's going to be awesome.
Yeah, I think we could do 15 million.
Yeah.
I've got James Ellsworth winning the first women's Money in the Bank. This was provided by Nails and NY. So, Carmella was in this match. So was Becky Lynch, Charlotte, Natalya, and Tamina. And this was the first ever women's Money in the Bank. So, of course, there was a lot of excitement. Who was going to win this? And the end result is James Ellsworth climbs the ladder, retrieves the briefcase, and throws it down and hands it to Carmella. So technically Carmella wins, but it's James Ellsworth that climbs that ladder. It's James Ellsworth that's the one that retrieves the briefcase, and it caused a lot of anger. They actually have to redo the match just a few nights later on SmackDown. I don't know if this was a reaction to the backlash or if this was the story that they had planned, but either way, to do that for the first ever women's Money in the Bank, not even that long ago. This is 2017. Like, you would think this is like Attitude Era or something along those lines, but this was just a few years ago. So Very, very disappointing.
I want to go on the record right now and say that I think this is my least favorite podcast we've recorded because I am cringing so hard right now, and it's not the good type of cringe. It is the, oh my gosh, why did they do this cringe?
Yeah. Well,
it is tough to relive these moments, but keep going, keep going.
I've got more. I mean, look, I've got a few more. I've got to give you my two worst. Let's wrap up with my two worst. So, for me, the one that I always say is the worst is Triple H versus Sting. WrestleMania 31. Sting, we'd waited so long for him to join WWE. He finally joins. He finally gets his WrestleMania moment. He's facing an all-time legend in Triple H, and it kind of writes itself. It absolutely writes itself. Like, this is a very easy match just to give Sting that moment where, you know, he finally gets to WWE. He can finally get a WrestleMania victory, and he doesn't necessarily need to do really anything after that. I don't think we were expecting like a crazy long run or a title run or anything that's going to rock the boat. Just give him that WrestleMania moment. And I suppose, you know, him just walking out is a moment, but the fact that he loses that match and the fact that like the NWO come down. NWO was a group that he was feuding with, so a group that he really didn't have a good relationship with. So for them to come down in his corner and kind of stand up for him, and then like DX come down, and this thing is just an overbooked mess. Not only is it the wrong result, but it's just an overbooked mess. And the reason for it, I think we've kind of touched on it on a podcast previously, was that Triple H was winning here to build him up as a heel, because the following year he was meant to face The Rock. It was meant to be Triple H versus The Rock, and unfortunately we don't get that match, so all of this was pointless anyway. Yeah, very, very frustrating. Do you remember that match?
Of course, of course. And yeah, I, like you said, when the NWO came out, it's just like, I get it, because NWO were also. Did you know that NWO were WCW? Fun fact. So them coming out was a reference to Sting being WCW. And not many people picked up on that nuance. So it was a really like subtle match, and it was a really well done exposure about the structure between WWE and WCW, and just saying like how WWE rose up against the diversity of adversity that was WCW, and not many people picked up on that. And I think that's why you didn't understand it so much, is because it's for intellectuals. I'm not calling you stupid. I'm calling myself smart. But no, I think
I need that on a shirt. The Wrestling Escape Pod. I'm not calling you stupid. I'm calling myself smart.
It was just like one of those matches where it was like booked by a kid with his action figures that got a WCW set that was NWO plus Sting against a DX set. And yeah, no, as you said, his entrance was the best part. But if entrances are what make a WrestleMania moment, then Sting's WrestleMania moment is the same as Pitbull.
Very comparable. Very, very comparable. I mean, another one that's similar to that would be Jerry the King Lawler. Jerry the King Lawler, one of the all-time great wrestlers. You know, he started wrestling early 1970s, and he was still competing all the way up to like WrestleMania 27. And he has a match against Michael Cole which is madness, absolute madness. They couldn't find a better opponent for him. But Michael Cole, who's a commentator, not even like on the roster. So, yeah, he has this match. He comes out, he's got a big smile on his face. I mean, Jerry Lawler, honestly, they call him the king of wrestling. And he is a king in Memphis. They say that in Memphis there was two kings. There was Elvis and there was Jerry the King Lawler. Like, he was that big of a deal. So he had like a big feud with Andy Kaufman, which, was bigger than wrestling. Obviously got made or part of a film, Man on the Moon. So that story was in there. And, he was like the former AWA world champion and just all the things that he achieved. To see him get a WrestleMania moment at WrestleMania 27 was really cool. But such a shame it was against Michael Cole. And then, of course, he would win the match, but he would keep the submission hold on. And the decision was reversed. So he ended up losing the match. He actually loses the match. That is in the record books as the official decision. So because he wouldn't release the hold when the referee told him to, they reversed the decision. And it's actually awarded to Michael Cole. So very, very frustrating. The final one, though, this is the final one that I want to end on. And this is hard to beat. This is hard to beat. Booker T versus Triple H, WrestleMania 19. This comes from Amanda Catherine, and I've got to agree, this is difficult to beat. Booker T was a big star in WCW. He finally comes over to WWE, and obviously he starts to really establish himself. He was pretty much established anyway, but he really was starting to become one of their main event talents as well. And so he gets into this feud with Triple H, and it's for the championship as well. And they're building him up, and things seem to go well. He wins a battle royal, he becomes the #1 contender, and then there's some very, very questionable promos. These promos from Triple H have got real racial overtones to them. He says things like, people like you don't deserve to be champion. And it's kind of questionable as to what Triple H kind of means by that. Now, Triple H denies that there was any kind of racial connotations to this. But we would see Ric Flair and Triple H as well saying to Booker T, go and carry my bags, or why don't you drive the limo? And, there was a lot of derogatory kind of overtones throughout the build. And of course, WWE had never really had an African American champion around this time. So, it was time. It was definitely time. And people felt like it was a no-brainer. They were kind of putting Booker T down so that they could really build up that moment at WrestleMania 19 when they put the championship on him. And of course, fast forward, WrestleMania 19, Triple H has his hand raised, and just big, big question marks as to what that whole build was about. I mean, seemingly they just built up Booker T to put him down and feed him, if you will, to Triple H. So I think for what that could have meant and the moment that could have been, and the missed opportunity that was, but also the questionable build, that for me has to go down as one of the worst results in wrestling history.
Yeah, because it wasn't the 60s. Yeah. Not that that was okay in the 60s, but that was more prevalent in the 60s. And WWE are certainly not the most forward when it comes to acceptance of all types of people. How many years was it then that it took for them to put it on Kofi? Which way too long. And that they had such a perfect opportunity. and they did really squander it. Yeah. And I think, yeah, that is probably top tier.
Anything else that you wanted to throw into the pot?
No. I think, though, next episode needs to be really happy, though. Yeah. This has been a bummer of an episode.
Thanks for joining us, everyone.
I'm just going to cry. I'm taking a cry shower right after this because it's like, oh my gosh, so many mistakes.
Yes.
This hurt.
Yeah, this did hurt. Yeah, we definitely will do a fun episode next, but we really do want to hear from you. You know, it's not always easy going back through the history of wrestling, looking at some of the worst results and some of the most questionable outcomes. I don't think was ever going to be a riot, if you will. So we will definitely do something fun next time. But yeah, get in touch with us. Get in touch with us. We've got a Twitter account now. You can go over to @WrestlingEpod on Twitter, and you can send your thoughts over there. You can get in touch with me over at Wrestling Daze on Twitter as well. Don't forget, check out Tommy's YouTube channel if you can find it. It's, I think,
good luck.
Triple T. Maybe Gregoy.
Maybe Gregoy. I don't even know at this
Tommy Toy
point.
Travels.
It could be anything.
It could be anything.
Spice it up. Spice of life.
But they can get you on Twitter as well. Is this @influencer.exe?
_exe. Yeah, and on Instagram, I am @influencer.bmp.
Nice.
Yeah, spicing it up. Zest of life.
Awesome, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you enjoyed this, or at least found it informative all the same. We will be back next week with a brand new episode for you. To Tommy, thank you so much, as always.
Daze, thank you.
Really appreciate it. And guys, we will see you next time. Bye for now.
Adios.